So, today I am really excited with two amazing panelists, or actually three panelists. I keep, referring to the companies who are joining tonight, but it's actually three panelists tonight, and it is actually all about health and well-being and how it interconnects with the built environment. So I welcome everyone who is joining us tonight to this session. And we will be diving and exploring deeper how these connections are influencing us, and in particular looking at the environments we spend so much time in during the day, and how we can actually create really healthy environments so that we can be supported individually, but also in terms of our communities. So, before we introduce everyone, I want to take a minute really to do an acknowledge country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Evitat acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to the elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people today. We are in particular here to listen, learn, and build a future together. So I welcome Dr. Fiona Gray.
Hello.
And Fiona has been already in some sessions with us. I'm absolutely excited. She has joined Evitat with her building biology consultancy. And she also has a wealth of experience and expertise with 25 years in architecture. She's also accredited in biophilic design, and lately also an accredited home biologist. Or is it home biology?
Home biology. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Biology. Yes.
Building biology as well.
Building biology.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And
also, can I just correct and say, yes, I have not sat my final exam, so I can't call myself actually accredited yet. So just not to overstate the
it will come, I'm assuming soon, but you're in the process, and
yeah, no, I've completed the course in Germany. Yeah,
exactly. So, and then I also want to welcome Alex and Maurizio from Takaynar. Takaynar is about landscapes which have purpose, integrity, and are regenerative by design. In particular, for example, editable landscape design, gardens. So one thing which really stood out in one of our first conversations was also that you're creating and designing, for example, for low maintenance, so that these landscapes can really thrive. And I love that concept because it's a busy world anyway, and people need to have access to explore, to grow with that idea. And I think this is a absolute amazing way actually to reconnect them to nature. So myself, I'm co-founder and CEO of Evitat. We are developing that renovation platform and sustainability with a logbook, so that you can demonstrate all your great improvements, investments over time, also to future buyers, but also making it very easy actually to connect, for example, with experts in the area who have a wealth of experience and years of actually helping people to shape and redesign their homes for efficiency, for comfort, and low environmental footprint. And Daniel is also joined tonight from overseas, and he will be the support in the back, running all, for example, questions, taking on questions, but also running some polls. So tonight, like I said, it's all about healthy, purposeful environments, in particular looking also on children's health and well-being. And we will dive really deeper into these areas with all the panelists. I want to hand over to Fiona and then to Alex and Maurizio to introduce yourself, and then we will continue with some questions.
Okay, sure. I'll kick off. Thanks, Sonia. Thanks, Daniel, for having me. I think you've kind of encapsulated it all. Basically, I'm an architect that's really moved into a space of specializing in biophilic design and building biology for improved well-being. And I think we'll talk later a bit about how I came to that being my primary focus. But that's where I'm at.
Awesome. And then we go to Alex and Maurizio. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an overview about Takaynar from your lens.
Hi, thanks for having us. Takaynar encapsulates a lot of different things. I think we've pretty much put together like 8 different disciplines to bring together the same result that essentially Fiona is going for. So we combine landscape design, regenerative design, engineering, permaculture, horticulture into creating spaces that are fit for purpose, which is really different from someone's little backyard right through to a school or a council area or an entire community or a workplace even. So it uses a set of principles and it can apply it to any environment. And that's where we get things like food forests, and then we get completely indigenous designs. Some things are more structural, like Fiona creates, and that's depending on purpose, but with the same principles.
Yeah, awesome. So, and with that, we can maybe just recap a little bit actually what is the problem in our society and why do we find ourselves actually today in a space where we face a lot of challenges, in particular around physical health and mental well-being. So for that, I just wanted to synthesize a little bit out of the definitions, in particular, how the built environment impacts, for example, us. And it can impact us through many ways, the noise, the pollutants, which come, for example, through material choices, our general neighborhood, the conditions around there, even the access to infrastructure. So all of these elements play a role how we perceive and how we live in these environments. And this is in particular important to understand in particular around these environments where we spend most of the time. And schools, for example, are a great way to look a little bit deeper into it, as well as workplaces and other environments where we spend, maybe the most of the days. So some of these connections are clearly, for example, that mental well-being is, for example, as per definition, the ability of all of us to realize our own capabilities, but also to cope with a normal stress level or to work productively. So to work also within the community structures. However, we have, for example, rising numbers around mental difficulties for people to cope with these elements. And I think some of that might actually really be tied into the immediate environments and the impact these environments have on us, where we spend actually time. It may be the workplaces, or for example, schools, early learning facilities, and so on. So do you like what are your experiences, and how do you see these connections actually to the environments immediately? Like, for example, even when you are looking at schools or other places, for example, workspaces.
There's a very direct correlation, and that's sort of started to be scientifically demonstrated now. And a lot of that has to do with the disconnect from nature. So I suppose the principle behind biophilic design is biophilia means a love. It means bio means life, and philia means love. And so it's a love of life. And so it's about supporting supporting life, and our connection with nature is really an innate thing that it's evolutionary. You know, it's all, we've always been with nature, and it's only in modern times that we've become so disconnected from nature. You know, this stat gets rolled out all of the time, but it's because it's a pretty profound stat that we spend 90% of our time indoors. And in doing that, we're not just enclosing ourselves in a physical disconnect from nature. We're blocking ourselves off from natural daylight, which affects our circadian rhythms, which affects our sleep patterns, which then affects our mental health. You know, the chemicals that end up off-gassing from the materials in our homes have impacts on our physical health. Those physical health, you know, that physical implication has knock-on implications for our mental health. So there's lots and lots of ways in which that our environments do impact us, and bringing nature inside, but also not just bringing it inside, having a connection to outside, and to nature. Even it's even been shown that a connection to nature through a mural that emulates nature, that looks like nature, even though it's not real, also has that effect, because it's this deep evolutionary type of response that we have to nature. When we see nature, we have a much more positive response when we look at a mural than we would to a blank white wall.
That's a very interesting even aspect of looking at it, because I guess this is exactly how we defined even the modern world. You know, we have actually designed out nature for a very, very long time, but we are getting now more and more these links, how that process has affected us. And we are rediscovering that we actually need nature to be in balance. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, in particular the biophilic design, and enables us to reconnect actually these elements. Yeah. So Alex and Maurizio, how do you see these things actually, and how do you work with, for example, these elements? What is your experience?
So we were actually talking in the car on the way here. And I think, okay, so it started from, we saw that someone had put plastic green fake plants on the top of their apartment roof. Like, we were just driving past, and for us, it's kind of ridiculous. You know, it doesn't really make sense. But then we realized that naturally within all of us, we want that. We're craving that. We really want the green, because it's in our nature to be around green, because it makes us feel better. It improves our air quality and so on. So I think it's as simple as we crave that, and it's crazy that we don't incorporate it in our design more, you know, and we are moving in that direction, of course, but yeah, it's natural.
Yeah, and also, like, by nature, what we are doing, we are literally designing to invite people to spend more time outdoor in nature. So literally our job is as simple as that: make as much as possible people to reconnect with the outdoor space, and gives all the benefits that we just like Fiona mentioned before, and we are talking about.
Yeah. I think one example I I even remember when my first son was really little, there was an opportunity even to sign him up to a forest kindergarten, which is pretty much, which means all the kids, day in, day out, basically, as soon as they enter kindergarten, they will be taken out to the forest and they spend all day there. And they have a small sheltered area, but it's not actually sheltering them completely away from everything. So if it's raining, they're trying to make that work most of the time, except if it's like unbearable or something. So it's a really interesting concept because it also increases the ability of the immune systems to fight off, for example, in particular, the winter cold and those kind of things. It has been researched, and there's some benefits actually to build that up in a young person very early on, and then having these natural immune defenses. And I find that such a simple way actually to do it. Like we moved to Australia. So I didn't have actually the opportunity to let him be integrated in that concept. But yeah, we moved to Australia, spent some time early on with him in Queensland. So he had a lot of exposure to all kind of nature in Queensland, us not even knowing all of, the creatures around and everything. But I think this is, when you start actually connecting with nature and having that exposure, it strengthens you against a lot of these typical things and really strengthens some, or comes actually with really interesting health benefits. And I think that's something we should really keep in mind, because what in particular Fiona was mentioning, the modern world has created these enclosed environments away from nature, which also then contributes often enough to poor indoor air quality, and we are not even fully aware of, creates a lot of health symptoms ranging from, headaches, which are maybe still manageable, to really even significant issues around mental health being and so on, or even allergies and asthmas. So I think there's a lot actually to dive into and to be aware of how it can affect you. And in particular, if you are if you are prone maybe to react to certain things, that might be something to really consider, decision making around not just materials, but also design decisions, and really to be aware how that integration with nature can really benefit you. So what can we consider to create healthy environments? And looking in particular here from the range of learning environments for children, workspaces, but also homes. So I hand it over maybe to Fiona to talk about your experience and what your pathway was actually over the years, and how you ended up actually at the current point, and what really matters to you most. Sure.
It's been a bit of a winding path to get to this point, and it's actually something that it's really deeply personal, actually, because my son, when he was born, we lived, that's him there. He'll be horrified that I gave you this photo. But that's
he's a young adult now, right?
That's him in the children's hospital at 6 months old, and he's looking pretty healthy there. But that was after we almost lost him, and that was due to extreme allergies. He was anaphylactic to the very first food that we introduced to him, which was, you know, pretty standard back then. I don't know whether it's still done now, but it was, he's 25 now. He's happy. He's, you know, big, 6'4", robust, healthy young man. But back then you started your kids on rice cereal, and I knew that something was, you know, not right, but I didn't draw the connection immediately. We lived in a terrible home. It was awful. It was my business. I had an architectural practice, and it was in a strip shopping center. So it was actually a shop, and my husband and I had converted it into like a little bachelor pad out the back for the two of us. So you know, we had our shop front, and that's where I worked from my office, and then I lived out the back, and there was no plans of a baby arriving. So the bachelor pad was kind of okay for us. But it meant it had no windows, it had no natural ventilation, it had no daylight, it was cold, it had no heating. It was an awful environment to live in, but we were broke, and that's all we could afford. And, you know, the priority was on getting the business established. So, and then Joel came along, and obviously it was not suitable for a baby. And we were trying to heat the space. We were doing that with unflued gas heaters, which 25 years ago I didn't really understand the implications of, even as an architect. And we saw his health really deteriorate. He you know, had terrible skin issues with eczema, or like extreme eczema all over his body. And it reached a point where one night he just lost consciousness, and he ended up in the high dependency unit at the Children's Hospital. And after a myriad of tests, they weren't even looking at allergies, because his symptoms weren't typical. He didn't get the swelling lips, and he's basically, his blood pressure would just drop, and he'd just go all floppy. And they finally figured out that it was allergies. And this was probably the start of the wave of, you know, where allergies started to become a lot more, this degree of allergy, this anaphylaxis, started to become much more prevalent. And I just had a sense all along that it was the environment that was doing that to him. And we moved, and, you know, we did spend many you know, days and weeks in the Children's Hospital over the first few years of his life, dealing with his allergies. And he ultimately outgrew all of them, but it was pretty harrowing, because he just about, you know, he just about didn't make it. So so that for me was, it's been a long, I was quite traumatized by all of that, to be honest, and I didn't actually apply any of that to my own work for quite some time. But you know, I just sort of wanted to sort of forget that it had ever happened. But then I realized that actually, you know, as an architect, you actually have an opportunity and a responsibility to make environments better for people. And so that's how I started to get into this understanding of the connection between health and our built environments, and figured that there was probably no better way to apply my skills than to help people create spaces that support their health and well-being. So that's sort of the generation of where I started going down a path of, in the beginning, I wasn't really aware of biophilic architecture, but I went down the path of learning about organic architecture, and then that ultimately led to sort of now much more sort of focused around biophilic design and building biology.
So when we look, like in particular, this slide taps on various aspects. What are the principles actually, ranging from building biology, but also biophilic design, in terms of the healthy home and so on? So what are the key aspects of it?
Well, there's a lot of aspects to it, but I think, you know, air quality is fundamental. And that slide that you've got there is a monitor that I have in my own home that shows me what's going on with our air quality at any given time. So looking at the VOCs, the carbon dioxide, the carbon monoxide, the particulate matter. But beyond that, access to daylight and sunshine, vitamin D, access to greenery, because we know that reduces blood pressure, improves mood. There's a whole bunch of reasons why green is important. But also beyond that, when I started getting into this idea of a healthy home, often it's just very scientific and focused around materials, but it's also goes into things like color psychology, how that can impact you. We know that colors associated with nature also can have a calming influence, or you can bring in pops of color, like you see berries and flowers in nature, that they sort of give life and vitality to a space. They will also enhance your mood. So there's there's a whole myriad of ways beyond just the typical things of using natural materials and reducing the off-gassing and that type of thing. There's many ways you can improve the health of your home.
Yeah, awesome. So in terms of just to maybe go back to even your home and the way how it changed, your perspective. Like we are moving actually to more energy efficient homes. So for example, the indoor air quality plays a key role actually in attributing actually a healthy home to that environment. So what would you say, like, what should we look out for? What are these key takeaways actually if we want to establish, for example, good indoor air quality? And what should we, for example, put a little bit more focus and attention towards, in particular, when we're looking, for example, at environments, spaces, living spaces, where in particular kids are spending a lot of time in.
Yeah, I think, you go for the big hitters because you can get really bogged down in trying to make everything perfect, and it's almost impossible. So go for the big hitters. So, if you can get rid of gas, I know gas is being demonized at the moment and people love their gas cooking, but the immediate impact that has is really significant if you're sensitive. And children are particularly sensitive. Babies are particularly sensitive, and that's, my son was a testament to that. Because it's an absolute chemical cocktail, what's in gas, even down to the odorants, so that you're aware that gas is leaking. Those odorants have, are chemicals as well. So there's formaldehyde, carbon monoxide, like there's just so many chemicals that you're exposing yourself and your family to. So getting rid of gas is fundamental. There's really low-hanging fruit. You can bring in air purifiers, which, HEPA filters do a really good job of getting rid of a lot of that stuff from your internal environment. What was your question again? I think I've gone off on a tangent.
Yeah, the key elements, what we should really think of, in particular when we are talking about healthy built environments and indoor air quality.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I was saying as well. The big hitters. So carpet is a one to look at, definitely, because it's or your flooring in general, whatever type of flooring you use, because it takes up so much space, and there's a lot of it. So that's where I was sort of saying, sometimes you can get really bogged down in trying to make everything perfect. But if you choose, okay, well, I've got this horrible synthetic carpet, if you can just deal with that one thing, that can make a big difference. So if you're repainting, the type of paint that you choose can make a big difference. If you can use a lime-based natural paint, that's a good place to start. So every home will be different. So I think it's about looking at what is the biggest bang for buck that you can find.
Absolutely. Yes. And when we are looking, for example, at like early learning facilities, or schools. And I think you also already said, you know, like, for example, the choices around paints, the carpets, like in many schools, there are definitely carpets. I know that from the primary schools of my sons, they everywhere carpet, and the exposure to kids from let's say the off-gassing of these materials plays a role, but as well, you know, the ability actually to ventilate these rooms, for example, as well. So the ventilation systems or natural ventilation, depending on the possibilities, availability, you know, to open and have actually cross-air ventilation plays also a significant role. In schools, that's probably more tricky because not every windows is for safety purposes.
Well, that's the thing, they're not operable, and that's a real problem. So having operable windows is really one of the key things that we can do. But even in terms of safety, that's not necessarily a problem. If you have very low windows and very high windows on the opposite wall, you get that chimney stack effect. Which will help air movement, you know, significantly, much more so than just having windows directly opposite each other. So there's really simple techniques that actually cost no more. You know, if you've got to have a window on each wall, think about where you're positioning them so that you do make the most of those that cross ventilation.
Yeah, absolutely. So brings actually the conversation back to the starting points. Like, if you have the opportunity to influence the concept of healthy homes through the early intervention of design, utilize that, work with an expert on finding actually the right way to apply good design for healthy environments. So not just for homes, it's in particular also, for example, workspaces, schools, early learning centers, all these environments where kids and adults are actually spending a lot of time most of the days. So and that really contributes to their ability to focus, to their ability to engage with the peers around them, to their ability actually to be a balanced person in many ways, and to enjoy actually these activities, productivity as well. So there's a lot actually around these decisions. And I think in particular in the work you do, the design plays that significant role actually to get it right in the first place, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and you are also involved, I think, or you had actually done or two projects which are directly connected to schools. Or one is actually in the making, I think, and this is something you have been involved in the past, the Steiner School. Maybe can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah, there's two Steiner schools there that are referenced, the Freshwater Creek Steiner School and the Ballarat Steiner School. They're both separate schools. And this was really where I started getting into the principles of organic architecture. And really, while we weren't using the language of biophilic design, because, you know, they're just words, a lot of those principles were being applied anyway. So things like there was a very strong focus on natural materials. So using things like, you know, rammed earth, not just because it's a natural material, it's a more natural material, but because it's got that beautiful tactile quality to it. And in fact, at Freshwater Creek, I just went back recently to have a look at it and see how it was holding up. And the kids have gone and put their handprints all over these beautiful rammed earth walls. And the architect in me wanted to be horrified by this. But I was also really pleased by it because it actually it was a demonstration of the fact that it is so tactile. Like the kids have gone and you know, they've wanted to touch that wall. Things like that on this slide, you can see we used the straw boards for the ceilings. That wasn't just because it's a natural material, but that was also about dampening the echo and the sound in the space, because all of that has an impact on how the kids behave. You know, these echoey square spaces, sound waves just bounce off and they become very loud and really difficult for kids with heightened, sensitivities around their senses. So, thinking of the acoustics of a space, often natural materials will be really good for the acoustics as well. Things like, natural wool instead of synthetic carpets. We used materials like radially sawn timber. So it has, an organic edge to it. So not only is radially sawn timber is really sustainable because as it suggests, it's radially sawn, so the round log is sliced in wedges, so there's no cut off the edge, there's no waste in each piece of the timber, so it's really sustainable, but it also has that very kind of wonky organic edge to it, which gives it a sense of life. It doesn't feel machined and clinical. So there was a lot about, and actually that photo down in the bottom, the colors sort of gotten all a bit washed out there, but the color was really important. We didn't want to be using just white walls everywhere. So that was actually, there's a technique called lasur painting, which is a layering up of very thin layers of paint, which gives rather than looking like a solid color, and you can't tell that from this photo, it has like almost a depth to it. So it feels like there's almost a translucency to the paint, and that gives the whole space a feeling of softness. There's a gentleness to the way that is expressed in the space. And then obviously, things like, visual connections to the outdoor space. The shape of the rooms was also important. So the rooms aren't square. And, there's a whole bunch of neuroscience being developed now, and a sort of a separate discipline called neuroarchitecture, that has findings that, our brain actually responds differently to non-rectilinear spaces. So these rooms were all slightly skewed and not quite square, and quite deliberate in doing that. You still don't want to create weird non-functional spaces, because if you get too clever with strange shapes, you end up with a very dysfunctional space. But thinking through those things, thinking about the sensory experience of being in the space, and that relationship to well-being is really important, and embedding the buildings in the landscape. So there's that really strong inside-outside connection, because we know that it reduces your heart rate, it reduces your blood pressure. There's some really good studies done in 2019 demonstrating, they looked at classrooms where they took the math scores of a standard classroom, and then they did some biophilic interventions, and then did math scores 7 months later. They had two tests. They had a control room and one that was done, and they actually showed significant differences in the response, the ability for the students to perform well in their maths exams. They perform significantly better than in the biophilic room than in the other room, with taking away all the other variables and controls.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I guess sometimes I ask myself, would have we performed in general, because I remember my school time with ups and downs, like, and sometimes I do wonder, would have been it differently actually experienced if certain consideration would have happened actually around these elements. And I guess Germany has explored a lot back in that time, and was quite spearheading often these the design thinking around these elements. But I also have to say, I do remember, for example, our primary school, it was more just purely functional space because of the sheer need actually to provide for many kids. And there was little consideration around material choices and for example, even the access or the natural light exposure and so on. So all of these elements were a little bit, not really considered. So I guess these are really, really interesting findings. And I think building that up and putting it and actually bringing it back into design concepts and then getting different outcomes is a great way actually to look at it. Fiona, you are also invited to a new project. So what is there the big vision?
Yeah, this one's really interesting because it's the British School in Jakarta, and I'm heading there at the end of next month for a sort of a deep immersion in. They're bringing in their focus is on well-being very strongly. They're running a well-being symposium where they're bringing in experts from all around the world in education, but also aligned fields to look at how can they reimagine the school through through a well-being lens. So biophilic design is one aspect of that, but there's a whole bunch of systems thinking experts, education experts. There's just a whole myriad of people that they're bringing together because they understand that well-being is at the core of, making sure that their students not only perform well, but also are healthy and live good, sustainable lives. So that's an exciting project that and they're also immersing the students in that as well. So I'll be working directly with the students as well to consider what it is that they and hear directly from them what it is that they want from a design. So often schools are being designed as new. So, the students don't have particularly, government schools often, there's bundles of funding to establish new schools and there is no school community yet. So this is bringing together all of the teachers, the parents, the students, government officials, externals from other schools, bringing them all together to really put this very, very strong focus on well-being. And I think that that's really the future of where education is heading, that, it can't just be a subject in the curriculum. Well-being is we've embedded well-being into the curriculum. You have to embed it in absolutely everything that you do, including your built environment.
Yeah, I love that concept and approach because it's basically allowing a human-centric approach in the first place. It's also co-designed with all the stakeholders involved who are not just the experts in the area, of design processes or, various others, but also those ones who are experienced then on the ground for most of the day, actually, that environment. So teachers, students, and staff members. I find this a great way. And it will hopefully create also an feeling of like participation in that process and a little bit of pride. I was part of that. I think it's a very nice way to get the buy-in and to get everyone's acknowledgement of what everyone or what even the bigger picture is and what everyone wants to achieve. So it's a great way actually to do this. So we are very much looking forward to hear back from you.
Yeah, I can't wait.
That, like what the outcomes of that part of that phase are. and to hear more actually how it then turns into even design concepts and so on down the track. Yeah. All right. So you have also your consultancy, and of course, you are in particular offering consultancies actually in particular for no, I'm playing for educational spaces,
Yes,
yeah.
yep.
And homes, of course, as well, but educational spaces are definitely an area you have a lot of experience and expertise in, and it's also really close to your heart. We have you listed on Evitat, so everyone can reach out or actually go on your website. So we will share also the link in the chat as well. But everyone who wants to also keep maybe in touch with Fiona or even ask her something, please feel free also to add some questions after the webinar, also on community on the page, and Fiona will be happily to answer any questions there as well. So Alex and Maurizio, so I want to give you now the opportunity to talk a little bit about your amazing work, and in particular how it really connects these outdoor environments with the needs and the desire you have scratched on, that we deeply actually want that connection back, and that there are certain elements where we unfortunately think, you know, an artificial little grass strip, you know, is the solution to it. So how do you bring this? How do you educate actually not just homeowners and people and renters, but you are actually now even going into, I think, public spaces and landscaping for educational like environments and so on. So explain a little bit how you position yourself, how you create actually that educational piece and your service offers.
Firstly, I just want to say I love what you do, Fiona, and what we do goes hand in hand. I don't think one belongs without the other, and our job is to complement that line where you step out the door and you look out the window and make it have that health impact that we're talking about, as well as impacting the environment. Obviously, we're doing everything for us humans. We want health, you know, we want the optimal life that we can have, but we also need to think holistically about the things that we share the earth with. So as I was mentioning earlier, we use a set of principles in our design, and they're the same whether they're a little pocket of land or if it's a really big property, because you still need to tick the same boxes, but they all have just a little bit of a different criteria, which can be style, or as you mentioned, color, Fiona. It invokes something different for different people. And then our job around that is to create an ecologically functioning system that meets the criteria of the household, the school, the community, whilst ensuring that we're meeting those practical needs. It's not all about beauty, as you also mentioned, Fiona. You know, if you do 10 million curves to make something look cool, it's not a functioning space, and it doesn't do anyone any good. Do you want to add anything?
I would like to add a little bit. First of all, Fiona, thank you for sharing like your story. I can relate so much with the story and with your son too, because I had a similar problem when I was a kid. So I can relate with everything. What I want to share is just a little story to put in perspective why we do what we do and the sense of everything. As many of you probably already know, I come from Sardinia, which is one of the blue zone in the world. which everybody knows what is a blue zone. Can everyone connect, put in the chat if everybody knows? So I skip the part of where I explain it. Anyway, like the blue zones are places, yes, familiar, places in the world where higher percent of people live more than 100 years. And yes, Silvia's from Sardinia too. So back after the war, like talking about around 40s, 50s, my grandparents were in Sardinia, and at that time the main problem to solve was food. So everyone was trying to find a solution for food. So who had a piece of land was growing food. Who had food had a healthy and strong family to take over in the next generation. So that was the basic of health and well-being. Fast forwarding in the in the early 90s, I was a little kid, and the economic situation in Sardinia was completely different, of course, from after the war. But at that time, a lot of that values passed through. So in that moment, most of the people had a job. We were not looking for a survival stage where we were, looking for food. There was a lot of abundance around us, but still, every single family had at least one member of the family that had a piece of land and was growing food for the family. So my grandfather had a piece of land, my father had a piece of land, and so on. So as a kid, our job was to bring the extra food to the people that didn't have that food in the community. So, and that is another really important element. So community, so a sense of sharing around the community. That is the reality that I grew up. Fast forwarding in 2016, I moved in Australia. And I found myself in Melbourne in a completely different scenario. What for me was normal, to have abundance of food, grow, like people they were growing food around the family, was not real in Melbourne for me. And when Ale and I start to do consultation for the landscaping, we really want to bring back this element in the designs that we were doing. And one of the first consultation that we have done, we went to this beautiful townhouse with a beautiful car, and was a person that had a really important role in our community in Melbourne. So it was a high professional with a really important position in the community. So when I was talking with this person about what was going on in the front garden, what he wanted, etc., he say, "Look, I want just grass and box edges around in the front yard." And I say, "Okay, look, that is not exactly what we do and the direction that we go with our designs, but let's talk about." And at the front of his house was a beautiful pear tree. And I asked him, "What do you want to do with the tree?" And he say, "Just cut it." And I say, "Okay, I'm not gonna do it, but do you know which tree is that?" And he say, "No." I say, "That is a pear tree." So, and he say, "So?" I say, "With that tree, when it's season, you can get pear, like you can get fruits. So you can eat the fruits from the tree." And he answered me. He say, I will never eat a fruit from that tree." And I say, "Why not?" Of course not, because I'm going to buy from the supermarket that the food is check. That is where I'm going to eat my food. So that answer just a kind of was mind-blowing for me, because obviously he wasn't a bad person. And a lot of time when I share this story, people laugh, but it is not his fault. So he is the result of the environment that he grew up. Remember that this person was a high professional. So he did all the studies to get to the position that he was in. But in all his experience was missing something really important. So like the lesson for me was who I want in the future in the most important position in our society. Who has to make a decision? What person, what experience, what expertise this person need to have? And I think that is a really important part of life. So if we are disconnect from these simple things in life, we can't make a decision for our community. So that was just to give a perspective of the job and the importance of the job on the design process that Fiona is doing and we are doing in public spaces and in private spaces.
Yeah, because that comes from his education as a kid, and he's a professional that actually designs large-scale projects for our city. So it's pretty concerning, that crossover. So this is
very interesting actually to hear.
Yeah.
I love that story. I think it's sometimes mind-blowing how much our perception of the modern world is geared towards accepting, and it comes through marketing largely, you know, because there's economic benefits, of course, to drive us all into the supermarket. And we had similar conversations, you know, oh yeah, well, and even I reflect, you know, on sometimes, you know, looking at certain produce, you know, and then picking the immaculate things instead of saying, look, there's an organic version. It's actually not full of chemicals. It might have some bumps. Why not? You know, I don't need to worry about digesting all that crap and stuff. So I think we, you know, and you're doing this amazing job to reshape that perception. And I think it's a very important message you're carrying to people, to allow them actually to reconnect and to explore what they can even grow within their little, you know, spaces, or even when we are looking at, for example, you know, schools, what opportunities do we have there for kids to explore that, to have an early connection point, you know, to pick up something and maybe to dust it off a little bit, to wash it a little bit, but then to eat it directly. And I think that experience is really unique and really stays with us.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have any negative connotations, you know, it's all up from here. So this project is a townhouse, and that one is an example of a really small space and how much you can do with a really minimal space, still applying all of these principles. So if we just go to the next slide.
This one?
Maybe we go back. We might be missing a slide. That's all right.
Okay.
So in this part at the bottom there that you can see, we're missing a picture, but I'll paint the picture. Basically, this space is about 1.5 meters wide, is it?
Yeah, almost 2, yeah.
Wrapping a house. And by understanding the entire ecological principles of how plants grow, it doesn't just have to be food, it's understanding the way that every plant grows. We've been able to create an extremely layered, high production food forest that has 8 dwarf fruit trees, You know, she's producing peaches, almonds, hazelnuts. She's actually got a macadamia tree, which is, she wanted that. It's a little bit big for the space, but you know, she loves it. Apple, orange, lemon, and then layering down from that and producing seasonal veg, all of her greens, berries full of raspberries and blueberries, rhubarb, etc. So this is a very small space, and it allows this woman, who is actually 85 years old, to grow her own food with harvesting as the maintenance. But it's not just that. So that's an example of food production that's using renewable materials. So we've got a wooden path. We've got all plants. There's an archway in there that's connection, an emotional connection for her. It's all permeable. You know, we're not having large water runoff like you often see in townhouses, where we just concrete slab everything and the water's running off to somewhere else. There's lots of bees, native birds are around, and it's just a beautiful natural system that brings her outside 4 more times a day than she was before. So we've got that daily connection. And the interesting thing about this one is we've noticed a huge difference in the way that this woman looks. Like, she looks really well. She's doing more sports. She's old. I don't know. I don't want to offend anyone here if they're 85, but she's older, but she looks better. And we did this 3 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
And that was a huge experience for us to understand how scalable this can actually be, and how we could feed, you know, schools. You could feed a whole cafeteria, or what do we call it, tuck shop here? I'm not sure what we're calling it now. If you set up a system and all the classrooms had half an hour each per week or month, it's possible to feed the entire school from a food forest. And that's just from knowing exactly how everything grows. Once the system's set up, it's very low maintenance. We have no nutrients leaving the system. So that's part of the maintenance, where you're chopping and dropping instead of putting it in a green waste bin, getting someone to collect it and then buying it back processed. We're just keeping everything in the system and building up better soil. Yeah, and that's just a great example of something that can be done in any manner. Can be done with all sorts of different materials, aesthetics, depending on the school or the council area or the workplace. But using the same principles, it works because it's a scientific principle. You know, once you know how to make things grow and how materials behave, it's the same as architecture. You can predict it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing which just popped up in my mind was also, no matter if it's a house or even a school, like any additional produce which can't be maybe consumed or something, there's a great way actually to share it. Exactly what Maurizio was saying, you know, what happened actually in the past where he grew up. You would share that produce with your neighbors, with your community. And that, again, connects you. It doesn't actually leave you out there completely isolated. And so it creates these connections between us, which are as important. And we had these moments, for example, during the pandemic, where a lot of that sharing community element was created. Between neighbors, between streets and corners. And I think that was really lovely. That was, and it binds people together. And I think it makes these personal connections. And the food forest, for example, that produce in the garden or in school environments, connect people actually, and that's a really beautiful outcome of all of this. Yeah,
absolutely. Researching the blue zones that Maurizio was talking about, one of the most fundamental things that they've looked at for the reason that they live so long and happy is community. And so we have to create places to build community, especially as we are struggling with technology and stress and anxiety and all of these different things, we need places to go and connect and simplify things. So
yes, absolutely. And maybe also to mention, I mean, there's a whole lot of absolute amazing projects. There are co-housing development projects which have an integral part of that element. So the landscape surrounding these projects are integral to the building of community. The producers growing on the land are part of that story as well. The Cape, for example, is a good project to look it up, for anyone also interested. But we have across Melbourne various also smaller co-development, co-housing projects which have implemented that element. And it's a great way to explore that idea and concept. And once you have understand the various benefits you get with that, it becomes this no-brainer pretty much. Yeah. It's a very, very beautiful way actually to live together in metropolitan areas where a lot is about fast pace and hectic lifestyles, but that really gives a grounded way to connect. Yeah,
absolutely. And it also has an economical benefit. A bunch of kale costs, I think it's like $6 I saw the other day. I mean, we're just talking about harvesting every day, picking off the leaves that you need. It's literally hundreds of dollars you can save just having fresh food, and it's got more nutrients and you feel better. It's just a no-brainer, as we talked about before.
Yes, absolutely. Should I go to the next slide?
I think we might be missing.
Are we missing one?
There's a design underneath there, but I'll explain the project. So this is an acreage that we've done in Ingliston.
And this picture is not done.
It's not done, yeah. But the design took over a year, and it was using the same principles, but on a larger scale. So we were hit with more challenges like natural disaster, which is a really important component in our cities that I think previous design has ignored. Sometimes designers have looked and said, no, it hasn't happened for 10 years. So we won't factor in the fact that flooding happens. We've just seen in Dubai, a once in a 75-year storm, still part of the cycle. So being prepared for fire, being prepared for flood, being prepared for all sorts of things that can happen, create proper regenerative sustainable landscapes. So this is in Ingliston, and we created a revegetation. It had around 10,000 plants in it of indigenous plants, and wrapping around, they're going to do an Airbnb solution so that they'll invite more people, which is the community aspect. They live on the property, produce their own food, all in a way that's designed to connect you with nature while still maintaining a full-time job, which is actually another part of our job that's really important, is understanding how long is it actually going to take someone to maintain this landscape? Because we know that nowadays you're not going to be outside all day in your garden, and neither do most people want to. It's just about letting the landscape do most of the work and working with nature and knowing how nature behaves. If we can go to the next slide.
If you want, I can actually quickly jump onto the pitch deck, and if you want the 2 slides which are missing, maybe is that okay for you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, give me just a second. That will be a bit patchy, but I think so. We had this one, and then this one was missing.
Yeah. So I feel like that one really encapsulates, that was taken around 1.5 years old. You can see, it's even got 4 olive trees in it. So there's enough olives to produce olive oil. It's a layered system that just builds over time. So it's more high now. But yeah, you can see, you can just walk past and pick kale and pick berries and pick your herbs that you need. And it's a really intuitive way to live with nature.
Yeah, that's great.
Instead of concrete and fake grass.
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
next one.
Maybe we can jump.
Alex and Maurizio, I might just interrupt for 1 second. We have a question that's come through from the Q&A. I think it's more referring to the Inglewood project. This person's asking whether the principles you used for the project, I guess kind of the fundamental approach that you tackled that project with, if you don't mind.
Which one?
For the Ingleston project.
Ingleston, not Inglewood. Sorry, Ingleston.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so pretty much the brief on this, here we go, you can see that. The approach that we use for this project, first of all, we had to face some of challenges of the nature of the site. So pretty much this one is on top of a hill in front of the Werribee Gorge. And it is an area that it is a fire risk area. So what happens is that if fire start, we analyze the site, and what happens is that from the Werribee Gorge is like the fire will go up, going uphill towards the house. So the first problem that we solved was to create with plantation a way to retard the fire in case this thing happen.
Can I explain?
Yeah, sure.
There's a few layers, and we did even a few extra courses to get to the level that we could on this project, because it was so complex and so many different things. So the first layer on the outer edge was indigenous plants that had fire retardant properties as part of the walkways, and they were further from the house. And then actually using the vegetable garden on the north side that was terracing wrapped around with heavy irrigation, so that the wall would always be quite wet. And then they decided as well to go for irrigation, what do you call it? Like the fireproofing around the house as well, just as an emergency. But they've got all the water on site. So, I mean, it's off-grid, this house, totally, which is cool.
And also in front of the house, there is a production. So it is a intensive production, which why we put it like in that spot close to the house. First of all, because it's easy, like it is practical to harvest the food from there, but also because if you have a veggie garden, let's call it like that, you have to irrigate, you have to give water in order to give the produce. So you're gonna keep that area wet. So it is another way to retard the fire in case of it. As an answer, like a general answer for the question, we always have some principles which are practicality, productivity, aesthetic. So that are pretty much the principle that we use in all our design. So we start in the explanation of this project with practicality, because in reality you have to solve a problem that need to be practical, and that is the main thing. But also we know, as Ale was saying before, most of the people here are busy. I cannot compare, like I told you in my story, my grandparents' life with the life of a person in Melbourne. So we totally understand that that is not doable to create a production of something that is gonna involve like your time and work and effort every day, all the days. So what we we create, it is actually a balance between the productivity and the skills and the needs of the household and the time required for it. So as Ale was sharing before, 85 years old woman that obviously cannot really do much, can manage a huge, like a beautiful food forest around a townhouse in a suburb in Melbourne. We have case studies of professionals, busy people like Kat and Daniela, that they had a concrete slab in the backyard and they transform it in a food forest with zero growing skills. They have a dog. The place is thriving. It is just amazing. It became the main spot for all the friends to come over because it's so inviting and beautiful. And again, like there is no much maintenance that needs, just harvesting stuff, and maybe like a major trim once a year. So
I think that's the other cool thing we've found is the way that the systems are designed. If you do neglect it, like if you neglect the forest, because the forest knows how to survive, they're fine. Kath and Daniela, they left their food forest to go for about a year just because they were really busy and nothing happened. It just looked cool, you know, instead of if you leave your lawn and your concrete, it just gets messy and ratty. But what we create doesn't. It gets better. And then if you want to tone it back, you can. And that's the regenerative side as well. You know, it gets better, gets healthier, instead of just creating systems that require you 24/7, when the reality is no one has 24/7 to constantly control their landscape.
So practicality that we mentioned, productivity that we mentioned, and aesthetic, because aesthetic, we have to make the design beautiful, inviting, because if you don't like the space that you are in, you are not gonna, the benefits of it are gone, because you're not gonna spend the time there, you are not gonna interact. So they are pretty much the principles that we use in all of our design.
I'm conscious of time.
Did I answer your question?
I think that was great. Thank you very much.
So we might skip through. I just had a few notes on the next one, into schools. Yeah. So connecting up, obviously we've done a lot of case studies on residentials, but most of them had families. And so we were able to see the relationship with kids. And often kids were actually wanting to go outside beyond the technology, which was a really interesting finding as well. And I think that's an intuitive thing that we have inside of us. We build habits with our phones and our technology, but we all know what's best for us. And there's a lot of studies that cover all sorts of things, from obesity to ADHD to general disorder and behaving differently, that prove that spending time, just a little bit of time in nature, even if it's 10 minutes a day, can really help kids to thrive. And I think we talked about the autoimmune diseases before. Sonia, Fiona, we were talking about that. That's a huge one. We come from nature, so building up our immune system is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that just to bring it back, I actually really love what you just said, even in terms of the regenerative element within the work you're providing, that you don't necessarily, like if you remove yourself, it won't die. So I think this is such an important element. Like even for schools, for example, sometimes, because I remember in the early learning, the kindergarten, there was a beautiful little corner. It was established by one of the parents, but then the kid moved on to school, and it was a bit of neglected, and it actually died off because it needed a lot of water maintenance and so on. So I think that regenerative element to have that implemented in that concept would have probably given the opportunity to create that corner in a really thriving little outdoor space, which would give constantly, and you have kids which run around, maybe hide in it or something, but it will basically just grow and keep actually thriving on that.
I walked past Collingwood, the primary school. I don't know if anyone knows it, but I was going for a run and I noticed that all the kids were in the line that just had the trees on the fence line. They had a huge playground to play in, and they were just all in this really close to the road, the fence line, behind the trees and playing and hiding behind the trees. And it was so interesting to me because they had huge playgrounds, huge grounds, they had balls, they could do all sorts of things. And they were just making stuff up, like telling each other stories and playing games just with trees, which was
once they explore these little elements, I think it becomes their hiding places, it becomes something of their imagination, and it's all of a sudden a very, very cool adventurous place to do all kind of things, and we need these kind of spaces for them to imaginary explore environments and to connect with it, but also to be more like inspired and motivated to use things. I think so often enough, the detachment between nature and how we use things, that they know if they can use certain elements from nature and create things. And I think there's a real element of exploring, realizing, and education built in everything. So it's a great way to look at it.
I think we're getting the call to wrap up.
Okay, maybe I just want to quickly maybe give you also an idea why these companies are actually with us on Evitat. Both companies have joined Evitat because of their integrals around regenerative design, of course, the healthy home elements, and really contributing to better outcomes. So we have a vetting process which also talks about actually to have projects you can demonstrate in that area, and you need to have some evidence around it. So we're really grateful that both have joined us in the sense how it actually contributes to your home. For example, this is my logbook. Everyone can create a logbook on Evitat. It really captures what you might invest in, and it ranges from, for example, good thermal performance of your home to energy efficient renewables. But it also taps into the landscape and that connection with nature, and even includes questions around, can you share produce with your community, with your neighbors? And so it taps into a lot of these elements we talked about this tonight. And I really want to encourage everyone to explore these things. I think we have also, for example, if you go through certain onboarding modules, in particular when you set goals for a major renovation, you get experts connected with your needs and aspirations. And that's a very nice way to look at it from the perspective who are really experienced professionals in that sector. So here, for example, you can then explore, we have here Bioliving by Design, and also Takaynar. And that really highlights that expertise based on your needs and aspirations. And then when you conclude a project with them, all that will be stored in your logbook, and you can demonstrate that, for example, to a future buyer. And we know that that element of real estate needs to change. Like, we need to educate people around what actually matters. What is quality in homes? How can you assure actually that a home is healthy, for example? How is the design contributing to comfort, but also affordability down the track? How is it connecting actually to the nature and surrounding? So we are exploring, we are doing these first steps. I invite everyone to join us. It's free for everyone to do so and to participate in that ecosystem we are all building together. I want to say a big thank you for everyone tonight, particularly to Alex, Maurizio, and Fiona. You have been wonderful panelists, and sharing your stories with us tonight is very valuable and very inspirational. If you if everyone want to ask in additional questions, please feel free to do so on the Evitat community page. Maybe Danielle, you can just reshare also the link. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to them. They both companies are listed on Evitat, or visit their websites, and then get into these concepts, explore these concepts for your health and well-being, but also for example, if you work in a school environment, influence decision makers to think about these elements more deeply, because they make a significant difference to everyone involved. All right, thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure having you tonight. And I hope to hear and see you back soon, and to talk more about the various aspects of the work you do.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
Have a great night. Bye.
Bye.